Nice.
Uh, okay, we are live. Thank you all for joining the Wildscast MGE's podcast. I am so excited about our guest today, Sarah Hurwitz, and please tell me if I mispronounce.
No,
But
perfect.
Sarah was a White House speechwriter from 2009 to 2017. She's an incredible personality that I've been following. A lot of people have been following, and it's really an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for being with us,
Oh,
Sarah.
thank you
Sarah,
for having me. It's great to be here.
awesome, really, thank you. She started out as a senior speechwriter for President Barack Obama. I think Obama's doing a podcast today with Bruce Springsteen, but everyone's listening to this one.
Clearly, I mean, come on.
So she was a senior speechwriter for President Obama and then served as chief speechwriter for the First Lady, for Michelle Obama. We're going to hear a little about that transition. And Sarah worked with Mrs. Obama to craft many of her addresses, including her 2016 Democratic National Convention speech and her political speeches during the 2016 campaign cycle. She traveled with the First Lady across the United States to 5 different continents and worked closely on policy issues affecting young women and girls as a senior advisor to the White House Council on Women and Girls. Sarah has been profiled in the Washington Post, in People.com, the Boston Globe, the Guardian. We'll go on and on and on. She was featured in the Forward as one of the 50 Jews who impacted American life in 2016 and 2019. She is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and the author of an amazing book, which I really am recommending all of our listeners get. It's called Here All Along, Finding Meaning, Spirituality, and the Deeper Connection to Life in Judaism. I cannot think of a more appropriate book for the Manhattan Jewish experience. As you know, Sarah, we are a outreach and Jewish educational organization, so this is perfect. And the book really speaks about Sarah's movement to becoming more observant and a vibrant Jewish spirituality, something that Michelle Obama actually tweeted about. She said about Sarah's book, and I quote, "Sarah Hurwitz is a brilliant writer with a big heart and a kind soul, and I'm sure Here All Along," that's the name of the book, "will reflect her thoughtfulness and eloquence, which I depended on for so many years." Her book is a really wonderful kind of guidepost for young Jewish people that are checking out and exploring their Judaism. She points out in the book that God and Judaism were always there all along. I love the name of the talk. So thank you, the book, excuse me. Thank you so much for being with us, Sarah. Let's get into it a little. You were working in the White House.
Yes.
You went through this breakup.
Mm-hmm.
You were pretty open about that, so I figured I could bring it up.
Yeah.
You were looking for something to do after you broke up with this guy. You had one night free a week, and you decided to spend that night at the local JCC where you walked into I guess, a deeper connection with your own Judaism. Tell us what that was like, why you decided to do that, and are the JCCs looking to hire you as a spokesperson now?
So, it was actually pretty random. I just happened to get an email advertising this Intro to Judaism class at the JCC. And I had this time on my hands. I was kind of bored and lonely. So I just figured, I'd grown up, without much Jewish background, kind of, slogged through Hebrew school, did the twice a year high holy day services, which were kind of boring and incomprehensible. And once I became a bat mitzvah, I just thought, okay, nothing to see here, right? That I'm a cultural Jew, but if I want actual meaning or spirituality, I'll have to look elsewhere. But Judaism is my heritage. So after I break up with this guy, I hear about this class and I just thought well, I should know something about my culture, my heritage, right? I might as well. Could have been a paintings class or a ceramics class. I mean, I was just looking for something to do. I was not on some deep spiritual journey. And the class itself was very standard. Just a standard class, standard teacher. But what I found in that class really blew me away. There was so much wisdom about how to be human, about how to be a good person, about how to lead a worthy life, about how to find profound spiritual connection that was not just God is a man in the sky who controls things, which I do not and did not then believe. And so I decided I just wanted to explore further.
It's interesting. And I'm just curious, are these all those beautiful things you just said about the Jewish faith? Were you not aware of that before? Meaning, I mean, you used the words, I wrote them down, boring and incomprehensible,
Mhm.
about which I would say is a good summary of the collective experience of so many young American Jews. Is it that we just don't know the profundity and brilliance that lies in our heritage, because it wasn't you weren't exposed to it as a child, and all of a sudden this class, which is not like a blowaway class, but like, so just talk to that a
Yeah.
little more.
So, I mean, I guess if your only points of contact with Judaism each year are two kind of, very long and kind of incomprehensible services, what would lead you to think that Judaism actually has profound ethical and spiritual wisdom, that it actually has something to teach you about how to cope with your challenges today, how to lead a life that you can be proud of? Like, you don't really see that in the High Holy Day services unless you know a fair amount. If you really understand the liturgy, if you understand and you can use
Right.
the siddur, the prayer book, then you will see a lot of the profundity, but that takes some real education. So it's not clear to me why the average American Jew would know what Judaism has to offer, right? And I actually think the problem is not Hebrew school, right? A lot of people like to blame Hebrew school, but that's not the problem. Hebrew school is actually fine. The problem is that so many Jews like me, and I'm talking very much about myself, we stopped learning at the age of 13. 20 years later, we have kids and think, well, someone's got to make these kids Jewish. It's not me. I don't know anything about Judaism. So I'll just dump the whole project of making my kid Jewish on some Jewish educator, and I'll
Right.
make them do it in 2 hours a week. And so the problem, I think, is more that we don't grow up, right? We never become adult Jews. We never really engage with the actual life wisdom that Judaism has to offer us as adults.
Yeah, I appreciate the honesty. It's hard to hear, but it's the reality, and it's we had a program. It only lasted for a few years. MGs for 20s and 30s
Yeah.
primarily, but we had a program called MGE for Youth, which the tagline was "Make your child's bar/bat mitzvah the beginning, not the end," because most bar bat mitzvah ceremonies are like graduation ceremonies from Judaism,
Yeah.
until, as you just very eloquently put it, you know, you have to raise your own kids, and then, like, what are you doing? What am I
Yeah.
using? And then all of a sudden, oh, stick them back in the Hebrew school so they can get what I had. So that's
Exactly.
I mean, you have to know it's exactly why I started the program for 20s and 30s, because I think it's such a
Yes.
perfect age for people who are exploring, what it means to them now before they make that decision as to who to marry. And I mean, I appreciate that, because I find that is, and who decided that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur should be the 2 times a
I
year
know.
Jews should be? I never got that.
I never got it either. It is, there's a lot of beauty and meaning to those services if you've taken, if you've had the
Right.
time to really learn about them. But this is not our most accessible work. And to make that the only point of contact is
Right.
quite strange. And I'll tell you, our tradition is not the most accessible tradition. I'm just going to be
Right.
honest about that,
Yeah.
right? We don't proselytize. So we don't actually have a long tradition of kind of translating Judaism for people who know nothing about it. So it was very hard for me to learn about Judaism as an adult. I had to spend hundreds, thousands of hours learning and studying, and people don't have that time. That's crazy to tell people that they should do that. And I actually wrote my book for the whole sole purpose of saying, okay, I've done the thousands of hours of work and I have distilled down for you what I think is the most radical, life transforming, brilliant, moving, inspiring wisdom that will change your life today. Like, I've done the work for you. You can just read this book, because
Wow.
that's the book I was looking for. That's what I was
Right.
looking for.
It's so interesting that you mentioned, because we don't proselytize. I guess we haven't gotten good at sort of putting, Torah wisdom into quicker phrases and bite size, portions for people. That's a really profound
Yeah.
thought, and by the way, I want to mention something about Yom Kippur. I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, there was a woman who came to see me about her son, a man who came to see me about her son, and he kept saying, he's rebelling. I
Hmm.
said, why is your son rebelling? Because he's about to marry this non-Jewish woman. So he called me up to meet with her, and with his son, excuse me. So I said, good, just give me a little background, so when I have the meeting, I can be a little more informed. And he goes, well, I brought him to Yom Kippur services every year. I said, okay, great. What else? Give me something else. It was quiet. Yom
Yeah.
Kippur, Rabbi, we sat, we fasted, we prayed. I said, okay, Jewish camp, something, what can I work off of here? Give me something to work with. And he was like, he just repeated the same thing. I said, sir, why do you think your son is rebelling? If that's his exposure, I don't want to hit a person when they're down, but we expose our children to Yom Kippur, which is very important. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Orthodox rabbi. I believe in Yom Kippur, but it's part of a bigger picture that people are just not seeing. I always love to say Simchas Torah might have been a better choice.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Or Purim, which is this week, Let me I appreciate that that honesty. You have extensive knowledge and extensive acknowledgments in the book. I just want to go back to your original story. You didn't acknowledge the guy you broke up with. Did you ever go back and thank him for launching you into, because I guess.
I don't know if we've been in touch over the years. I don't know if I've formally thanked him, but he knows he's mentioned in the book. I let him know before it was published.
All right.
I also, it's funny. I just need to go back to just a point you made, about the idea of marrying someone who's not Jewish as rebelling. I do a lot of work with Jews in their 20s and 30s, and I'm actually seeing a lot of people in interfaith marriages who are embracing Judaism passionately, really passionately. And I'm not convinced that two disengaged Jews who don't really like Judaism marrying each other and having kids is a better way to continue Judaism than a Jew and a non-Jew marrying who gets excited about Judaism and decide they want to pass it on to their kids. I would put my bet on the latter couple just personally, but I just wanted to put that out there. And
I hear you. How important do you think is it for the non-Jewish person to convert?
So I think it depends completely. I think it depends. Sure, I think couples where that person wants to convert, maybe there'll be more Judaism in the home, but frankly, maybe not. Depends on why they're converting. It depends on their passion. Sometimes people don't want to convert because they feel it will be hurtful to their family of origin. So they say, listen, I'm committed to raising Jewish kids. I'm committed to having Judaism in my home, but I don't want to lose this connection to my family. I think every situation is different. And I think there's a lot of ways to embrace people and welcome people. 72% of non-Orthodox Jews are now marrying people who are not Jewish.
Right.
People are welcome to stand at the shore screaming at a ship that sailed 4 decades ago. I prefer to say, hey, what an amazing opportunity to welcome more people into our tradition and to share it with them and to show them why it's so powerful and valuable and to get them excited about being part of it and taking it on. That's my perspective.
Yeah, listen, no, I appreciate you sharing that. That is a correct number, 72%. And I'm a big proponent of conversion because the statistics also demonstrate that less than 20% of interfaith families where the person who isn't Jewish has not converted raise their kids Jewish. And I'll tell you as a parent, kids have these radars. I call them hypocrisy radars. Even if you're not really being hypocritical, kids just smell it. So if you want me to be Jewish, but you're not, or you want me to, and you have that, by the way, in all segments. In the Orthodox community also, you have a parent who sends their kid to a day school and kid comes home, starts doing Shabbat things that the parent isn't. They can't handle that. They need consistency. So I would just, this is my personal opinion. I'm a big proponent. I'm not a proselytizer because I don't believe Judaism. I don't believe that, unless you're Jewish, you can't have a relationship with God and God doesn't love you. We don't believe in that as far as Judaism is concerned. But it usually doesn't work unless there's a commitment. And often I have found the commitment is greater on the part of the non-Jew coming in.
Sure.
And I've had a lot of stories like that,
I also think it depends a lot on the community. I think, even until recent times, you have a lot of communities where the non-Jewish member is not fully welcomed. I guess if they convert, it's better. But I guess what I'm wondering is, has anyone done a study of communities that fully welcome and enthusiastically embrace interfaith couples? In that case, is it true that the person who doesn't convert they're not as likely to raise Jewish kids? That's actually something I'm curious about, because I think a community welcoming, not just welcoming, but really actively engaging, actively saying, how can we share? What can we teach you? We're so happy to have you as part of us.
Right.
I think that makes a big difference. I think, when an interfaith couple comes to a rabbi who says and they say, we want a Jewish wedding, and the rabbi says, no, I can't. I don't know if that's bringing someone closer to Judaism or further away from Judaism. It would certainly push me away from Judaism. So I
Mhm.
guess it just depends on the couple.
Yeah, it does. I've found, I mean, look, this is purely anecdotal. I don't know of any
Right.
study. It would actually be really interesting. It says, I always like to say also, don't judge Judaism by the Jews, because it says 36 times in the Torah, the Hafta Tager, you shall love the stranger.
Right.
It's mentioned again and again and again. I just taught this last week that even though there's a Torah prohibition in abusing any person,
Yes.
physically or verbally. Lo tonu, it's the prohibition of it's actually translated as oppression or abuse, but the Torah goes out of the way for a ger yatom and almana, which is widow, orphan, and strangers the convert. That
Right.
God takes personal offense, so to speak, when that
Yes.
happens, because they're more vulnerable in society. They're less, but it's a major, major issue. It's a big part of my rabbinate.
Yes.
And I don't think that Judaism is a little boys' club just for Jews. I think it's open for anyone who wants to come in, but there needs to be a certain, I think, interest and commitment. And kids pick up on that.
Yeah.
Let me take you back a little back into your political world. I'm really fascinated by this. You worked for Hillary Clinton in the 2008 primary, and
Yes.
then you went to work for Barack Obama. Was there? I know everyone throws the two of them together now,
Right.
but then I remember there was a lot of, was that problem for you? Like, were you like how did that work for you?
I have to say, the Obama people were surprisingly welcoming because I shared that concern, right? It had been a very toxic primary. I was worried that people would be suspicious of me, that they wouldn't trust me, but it was actually just the opposite. Barack Obama actually called me, I think my second or third day in the office, and just said, I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for being part of the team. We're so happy to have you. I think probably my fourth or fifth day, they brought me in to meet with Mrs. Obama to help her with her Democratic convention speech. And I had actually kind of objected to doing this because I was saying, guys, I was just on a rival campaign that spent 17 months opposed to her husband. Like, you really do. I don't think this is a
Wow.
great idea, but
Right.
she could not have been more welcoming, more cordial, more kind. She literally, after our first meeting, she invited me to her home in Chicago, to their home, and we sat in her living room for 90 minutes. And she just said to me, here's who I am. Here are my values. Here's what I'm passionate about. And I was really moved by the openness, by just like the welcome. And I will say, there was some good natured teasing for the first few weeks. And a
Mhm.
lot of it came from people on the campaign who I had known from previous campaigns, right? So there was the kind of good natured, mixing it up. But no, I really felt welcomed right away. And you then saw a similar thing happen when he asked Hillary to be his Secretary of State. So that was pretty much, I had already seen that pathway in. So it didn't
Mhm,
surprise
mhm.
me at all when he asked her.
Interesting. And what was your life like? I mean, did you have a life? Your book, you described this time in your life when you dropped a dish on the floor and you didn't stop to clean it up for 2 weeks because you were just so busy. Um, I mean, and what was it like? And you took this. I mean, you were connected Jewishly. How did you kind of balance that? Was there Shabbat? Tell us a little.
Yeah, it's quite hard. I mean, I actually think, the Torah telling us that not only should we rest on Shabbat, but our animals and our servants should rest on Shabbat. That's a really interesting, it's very interesting because I actually think you can understand that in a more metaphorical way to kind of imply that like during the week you start to feel like an animal, right? You kind of you start to feel just like kind of like a workhorse, just plowing through, just doing what needs to be done. I felt very much like a servant often because that's what you're doing in public service, right? You are serving your country, you're serving your boss. And, I do think I actually went through a period in the White House for a few months when I actually had a pretty rigorous Shabbat practice. I didn't check email during Shabbat. I really shut down. And that was just tremendously valuable. And my
Wow.
colleagues were so supportive and so proud of me. They were like, oh, this is great. We're not going to bother you. This is so wonderful. Like there was real support for that. I ended up after a few months just deciding that, given the increasing workload that was coming up in the last year, and given the fact that I am not someone who feels strongly about being traditionally observant in that way, I ended up kind of transitioning out of that and, I would still go to Friday night services. I would still do dinners with friends. I would try to really take off Friday night and Saturday morning. But, I do, and even now today, I do try to kind of really power down on Fridays and Saturdays. I certainly wouldn't call myself, halakhically observant of Shabbat. I do sometimes check emails. I do other things, but I do try to have a mindset of not the weekday, of
That's amazing.
Let's make this different. And let me tell you, it was those months of doing Shabbat in the White House were actually critical for helping me figure out what I wanted to do next. And they actually gave me a space in which I could start to hear my own voice. As a speechwriter, you're always hearing the voice of the person you are writing for, because writing for someone like the Obamas, it's not about scripting them, right? No one puts words in the mouths of Barack or Michelle Obama. It's about channeling them, hearing what they want to say, channeling that. And, for the first time, I actually had a little bit of space to listen to my own voice. And I think that's how I decided that I wanted to write this book.
Wow. That's a beautiful message about finding your own voice, which obviously as a speechwriter for such prominent personalities can be a challenge.
Yes.
And Shabbat, let's stay on that for a second. So Shabbat, I had the opportunity for the podcast also to interview Senator Lieberman, who's probably the most famous Sabbath observant.
Right.
He talks about how when he had to vote in the Senate on Shabbat, he would walk and the Secret Service would be behind him. And, what would you say to a lot of our participants? Okay, they're not writing speeches for the president of the United States, but they are trying to make the most of their careers and they're trying to get ahead. And some people, is easy. I'm also an attorney, and I remember I worked for a big firm and they were very understanding. As long as you put in your Sundays, you could be off on Saturdays. But you're running your own business. That's
right.
I have a student actually with he is. I'm not going to mention his name. He knows who he is. He's probably listening. And he's an amazing tennis player. He's a tennis coach.
Wow.
And so much of his personal business was on Saturdays, teaching tennis. And it took him about 2 years for him to give it up and to find enough customers to be able to make it work financially on, when it wasn't Shabbat. But what would you say to people in terms of actually the point you were making about finding your own voice? I thought that was very beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is we live in a totally consumerist society where all day long we are sent these messages again and again of you are not enough, you don't have enough, you need to buy more. But to buy more, you need to work more. And you work more so you can buy more, so you can work more, so you can buy more. It's sort of this endless consumerist cycle that's fueled by feeling like you don't have enough. And there's kind of a relentless dissatisfaction and striving and anxiety that comes with that. That is just the world we live in. And, Shabbat is this quite radical protest against that. It's just this radical 25-hour rejection of that every week where you say, no, actually, I'm not spending money. I'm not working. I'm not producing. I'm not consuming. I'm not liking ads on Facebook. I'm actually rejecting that entire striving, not enough, anxious mindset. And for 25 hours, I'm just going to rest in enough. I have enough. I am enough. And I am actually going to focus on things that really matter, which is time with people I love, which is time with the tradition I care about, which is time actually taking moments to listen to voices other than that kind of consumerist voice, right? I think that that's where you actually get a little bit of a chance to reconnect with yourself and with others. It's almost like this humanizing kind of thing, which is why even if you don't, I think that sometimes people are scared of Shabbat because they think it's all or nothing, right? They think it's either 25 hours, super, rigorous in every rule or nothing. And that's really intimidating, right? I often tell people, look, you know what? Just try Friday night, shut down Friday night, 5 p.m. Friday night, 6 p.m. Friday night, shut down, see how that feels. And you know what? If that feels good, add Saturday morning, see how it goes. I think you can really enter into this, but whatever length of time you take, whether it's like an hour or 3 hours, I would try to make that really rigorous. Really actually be off the phone, be off the screens, don't be spending money, don't be kind of doing this everyday stuff. Create what Rabbi Heschel called a sanctuary in time, a palace in time, or I forget it. It's palace, sanctuary. I think
he said a sanctuary in time.
Sanctuary of time. Yeah. Right. Create a space where time feels markedly different. And I think that's really the magic of Shabbat. What folks who are very traditionally observant are doing is they're plugging up every nook and cranny and crevice through which the ordinary consumerist world can seep, right? All those little rules, you might say, oh, that's so nitpicky or in the weeds, but it's actually necessary to create a different space in a society that's always trying to bombard us with advertising and consumerist stuff. They actually create a very thick container to keep that out for 25 hours. And I think it's worth trying that, even if it's just for a couple hours. Just see how it feels.
Wow. God, would you be interested in working for the Manhattan Jewish Experience? That was really well said. I mean, that was such a good plug, and it's the truth. And I've been saying this all along. Judaism's not an all or nothing proposition, and especially when it comes to Shabbos is so beautiful because it's got something for everyone. If you decide you can't do the whole thing, you can. I mean, it's so well taken. By the way, your quote from Heschel, he has a beautiful. Anyone who's ever read any of the wonderful writings of Abraham Joshua Heschel. So he wrote a book called The Sabbath that you just quoted from.
Yes.
And in that book, he talks about the two types of human dimensions that we are supposed to sanctify according to the Torah, time and space.
Yes.
And he says that whereas he's really talking about Western people, we become obsessed with sanctifying space. Even our synagogues, we create these cathedrals, and we basically sacrifice time at the altar of space.
Yes.
And Shabbat ultimately is really about sanctifying time. Time in Judaism, he argues, is more important than space. And something else I'll just throw in, I might appreciate this, from the writings of Nechama Leibowitz, who was a great Bible scholar from Hebrew University. She passed many years ago, but she wrote something very, very powerful. She said that who sanctified time in the Torah versus who sanctified space? Space was sanctified by Moshe when he built he commissioned Bezalel to build the sanctuary. Right. And when it was time to actually inaugurate the sanctuary and use it, it was Moshe that God commanded to sanctify it, whatever that means. He anointed it with some oil.
Right.
Time was sanctified by God himself. At the very beginning of time, the seventh day of Shabbat. We say that in the Kiddush. So I always try to kind of just make us aware of the fact that we are, we're just in the world of things.
Yes.
And he actually uses the word thinginess. We're obsessed
yes, right.
with
so
thinginess.
Great.
It's a very cute word.
Yes.
And I just love the way you just put that about creating a thick enough container to be able to not be bombarded by those images. And I'll tell you the other thing for our population, from MG ears or people are listeners, the social media is really also
awful. It's relentless, right? Yeah. I love the way you're talking about this because you're right. That's a perfect example, right? And the message is always, you're not enough, right? You don't have enough. Other people's lives are better.
And it's other people. And by the way, it's not companies. It's our friends.
It's our friends.
We always do this also. I went to find a Purim costume yesterday. So I'm like, got to show everyone how cool I look in this stupid costume. And all of a sudden we're making our friends feel, we don't mean to do this. We know I was with my, we went away during COVID. We got to go away a little, my family. And my daughter was taking a million pictures. She's 16. And I said, honey, just be careful where you share this. Not everybody gets to go to Florida, in the middle of I said, you're going to post it and all of a sudden I'm going to get a call from your friend's parent. Thanks.
Exactly. I mean? Right.
And all of a sudden everyone, so I just think that's added a certain layer of complexity to, and the need for, it's actually easier for us to sell Shabbat since Facebook and Instagram just became so popular because people are really feeling the need to put it down. In your book also, you said here that as a non-observant Jew in Judaism, you discovered the questions are more important than the answers, you said. And you said, while many of the answers are quite impressive, it turned out that Judaism, I'm quoting, it's a beautiful quote, that Judaism has deep wisdom to offer, teachings that have helped me to be kinder, more honest, challenge my lazy and self-righteous assumptions about religion, and led me to view the values of modern secular society with a more skeptical eye. It sounds like Judaism helped you doubt some of your doubts. Can you tell us a little more about that? And what
Yeah.
what is it about the secular part of our society that you look a little more skeptical about?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the prevailing ethic of modern secular society is pretty much you do you as long as you don't hurt other people too much. Okay. And by the way, that's okay for secular law, right? I don't think that American law should be, dictating our, deeply dictating our moral values. The ethic of American law is, don't infringe on other people's property rights or civil rights, don't physically assault them. And that's fine. But, where's the part about generosity and compassion and self-sacrifice and self-restraint and self-discipline and all this stuff? Like, there really is a very thin ethic in modern secular life. And I just found a much deeper and more demanding ethic in Judaism, one which I'm nowhere near meeting at all. But there's just so much in Judaism about, the demands of sensitivity to others. I find the old lie that Christianity is a religion of love and Judaism is a religion of law to just be so infuriating, because if you actually look at Jewish law, what it is doing is actually dictating quite a rigorous ethic of love, right? Judaism doesn't say, oh, give money to the poor. Okay, well, here's $5. I'm done, right? Judaism actually is going to go pretty deep into not just how much you should give, but how you should give it. Do you do it in a way that empowers people instead of disempowering them? Do you do it in a way that humiliates them or in a way that preserves their dignity? And you start getting into all of these details, which you begin to realize they're almost cultivating a kind of vision. When there is a law that says if you have given someone a loan and they're not able to repay it, you should actually avoid running into them in the street because you don't want to embarrass them. That kind of sensitivity that Judaism is asking that you show to others is quite profound. And I think that, frankly, just the core Jewish idea that we're all created in the divine image, which believe in God, don't believe in God, not relevant. The core idea that every human being is, sacred and precious and equal and unique, that is the exact opposite of modern consumerist society, which says your worth depends on how much you produce, right?
Right.
Your worth is your value on the capitalist in the market. Your status, your wealth, your fame, what you can monetize. And it's a very radical idea to say that, no, actually, the person on the street who just asked you for money has the exact same worth as the CEO.
Wow.
That is not what our society says.
Wow.
So I think I found a real challenge to kind of modern ethics in Judaism that I think is pretty important right now.
That is very, very powerful. As a lawyer, I think you'll appreciate that I don't know if you meant to make this distinction, but I heard it.
Yeah.
I heard a distinction between duty and duty/obligation and rights. See, we live in a society of rights. Now, you articulated this wonderfully when you said, listen, we have separation of church and state, so you can't have a legal system that's going to impose ethics upon you. Your ethics are supposed to be drawn from your own personal value system, religion, or what have you. Right. For the United States of America to legislate chesed, kindness, would be really to be encroaching on religious law. But the problem is so many of us grow up with American law or British common law as it becomes our religion.
Yes.
And Judaism's all about obligation and demands much more than it is about rights and privileges.
Yes.
Now, I understand why America needs to be that, and I'm not advocating that should change. The question is, how do we make that shift? Because as an educator, I will tell you, I often get this look, as long as I'm telling people that the demand is to be kind, but if I tell people the demand is to observe Shabbat, to keep a little kosher, this, that, and the other, I was like, don't tell me what to do. I want to live in a society, and I'm used to living in a society with rights and privileges. And if you cross that line, I'm going to sue you to enforce those rights and privileges. Whereas the Torah is all about 613 mitzvot, and everybody likes to, sugarcoat the word mitzvah to mean a good deed. And we both know it doesn't mean a good deed. It means a commandment. It's not the 10 suggestions. It's the 10 commandments. How would you, I'm asking you for some help here, I guess.
Yeah. I get it. Like, I think this is such an important question. And what I would say is, like, people actually undertake all kinds of regimens to where they restrict their own freedom. They do like insane juice cleanses, and they do really specific diets, and they do rigorous workout regimens, and they do all these kind of spiritual practices that they, kind of collect from various places. People do this all the time, right? That actually people don't have a problem at all with doing it when they think there's a benefit to either their mental or their physical health, right? I don't think the issue is that people aren't willing to restrict their freedoms, right? Like how many people are, how many of the folks that you work with, are very careful about what they eat, what they put into their body, how often they work out. Like we have no problem with that, right? We'll see a nutritionist, we'll see a career coach, we will see a personal trainer, and we'll do what they tell us to do because we know there's a benefit. And I think that too often people think of Judaism as a lot of rules without a benefit. And, it's easy to look at something like Shabbat that way. And until you've actually experienced it, when I really experienced Shabbat with people who were observing it rigorously, I thought like, wow, there's a huge benefit here. Yeah, there's a cost. Let's be clear. There is a cost to observing Shabbat, but there's a huge benefit. And, I understand that in a traditional, the traditional argument is we do these things because we are commanded by God. I don't necessarily believe that. I think a lot of Jews don't believe that. But I think that another way of doing this is we do these things because they actually make us better human beings.
Of course.
They actually make us. And frankly, I do think, the root letters of the word mitzvah come from, I think it's the same word as like to connect, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, there is some sense in which in actually undertaking these rules, these laws, you do actually connect more to other people. A lot of these things are kind of insisting that you be in community. And I do think you connect more deeply to the divine, however you define that, if that is a word that resonates to you. When you are actually, 25 hours of Shabbat where you're not just someone's servant or animal, you're actually kind of claiming your humanity. There is a spiritual feeling to that I think you can actually experience.
Yeah,
right. I think that's true of a lot of these commitments.
Yeah, I wrote down, it makes sense. You were a speechwriter. Rules without a benefit. I just love that. And 100% you acknowledging the fact that whenever we see the benefit, we're willing to make sacrifice. I've said this a million times. I don't know why MG in the last, maybe it's because of COVID. I don't know. We have so many doctors coming and medical students coming to MGE right now for some reason. We always had a lot of lawyers. Now we got a big influx of medical students from the various schools in this city.
Yeah.
And I always said, like, how much sacrifice does a typical medical student? Just think about your first year Harvard Law School. I'm sure it was no picnic. And I remember my first year law school. It was not simple, but you did it. You sucked it up because you want to get through this and you want to be able to become a great attorney, a doctor, whatever it is. And then, and by the way, oh my God, I'm just blanking on his name. Gordon, help me out here. Very prominent person in the conservative movement, wrote a great article on this. It was after, it'll come to me, but it was after a Pew study that reported a really abysmal kind of attitude on the part of young Jews towards traditional Judaism. Right. And he said, why are we surprised? In every other realm of life, we say, if you want to be great, you need a sacrifice. You want to get into a good college, you better buckle down in high school. You want to go to a good graduate school, you better work your tail off in college. And then when it comes to Judaism, we just try to make it as convenient as possible and try to do this and try to that. And then we want to know, why don't they take it seriously? Why is nobody, exercising any commitment here? Because we've basically told our children that you don't have to be that committed and still be Jewish. And
you were singing my song. Like I just, I don't think that young Jews are looking for something easy. I think they're looking for something transformative and meaningful. And they are finding it, by the way, everywhere but Judaism. Buddhism, Burning Man, crystals, whatever people are doing, it is here in Judaism. But you're right. You have to put in a little bit of effort. Not an insane amount of effort, but some effort, right? Judaism, without basic background and literacy and knowledge, Judaism just seems kind of boring and off-putting and strange. But once you actually have the context to understand it, you realize that it's incredibly radical. It's a radical protest against the worst parts of modern culture. And it is, it's 4,000 years of crowdsourced wisdom from millions of pretty smart people. So I don't know. It's like you put that against that one guy on the internet who has some guru thing that he wants to share. I don't know. I'm going to maybe do the former. It's just me.
No,
You
I
know?
hear you. And I also think it comes down to what you said earlier on in our chat, which is us educators doing a better job of packaging ideas. It's hard because as more and more young Jews get more and more educated and more sophisticated in their fields, and unfortunately not terribly knowledgeable or
Yeah.
inspired about Judaism, Judaism will continue to look more and more backward, less
Yes.
and less sophisticated, and it's not going to be taken seriously. And that's what kills me. I have to tell you, as someone who is so enthralled, with classical Judaism, and I just think it's the most brilliant approach to human existence. And it's upsetting watching really smart, well-educated people blowing it off and it's not their fault. It's just the
Right.
packaging, it's the presentation or the lack thereof, and
Yes.
then rules, rules, rules. By the
Yes.
way, I want to say something else. Something you mentioned before about that. There are some people who think you're just supposed to do it because you're commanded to do it. And I will tell you, from my understanding, even those rabbis that emphasize what's called in Hebrew being mitzuva v'oseh, being someone who simply is an obedient servant of God, following God's will, not questioning.
Right.
If you ask that, let's say, rabbinic scholar, and why, why does God want you to do this? What do you think? What does any of it? I mean, does God get any? Our definition of God does not allow us to believe that God's getting anything from this.
Right.
You know, so clearly it's being done for us. What are you getting? Why am I doing? Okay, I'm doing it because God said so. Great. Why? What impact does Shabbat have on you? What kind of discipline does keeping kosher have? Does all of these great ideas? At the end of the day, I this is my personal hashkafa, philosophical outlook. All of Judaism is a gift because it's not like God was lonely and needed some entertainment down here on earth to keep himself busy up there. If you really believe this is some sort of God-given guidebook to human existence, you have to, even if you're just doing it because God said so, you have to ask yourself why.
Hmm.
And
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I also think just almost going at the kind of baseline assumption of what you're talking about, that is certainly one Jewish conception of God, right? One that many people hold, and that's quite meaningful and it very much part of classical Judaism. But I think this is actually a big sticking point for a lot of Jews because they'll say to me, "Well, look, I don't believe that there's an all-powerful being in the
right,
sky who controls
right,
everything. Hence, I'm a cultural Jew." What they don't understand is that actually there are many, we don't have dogma of God in Judaism because we have the humility to understand that we are talking about something far beyond the capacity of our tiny little brains to reduce to some simplistic little dogma or definition. To do
yeah,
that is idolatry. It's shrinking the
100%,
divine to.
100%.
So, I really appreciate that there are many Jewish conceptions of God based on people's lived experience and their understanding of Jewish tradition, whether it's the mystical idea that God is everything, Buber's idea of God arising when two people are in deep relation and deeply connecting, what arises between them is God. I mean, you can go on, but I actually think that's a really fundamental problem that we face is a lot of Jews show up twice a year, they see the kind of man in the sky that they think is being portrayed in the Siddur, the prayer book, and they say like, I'm out. That's fine. I'm a cultural Jew, but really I find spirituality in fill in the blank.
Right.
That is a mistake we have made.
It's a
We
you.
do not talk about God enough, and it
We don't,
makes
we
me
don't we don't
crazy.
talk about God, and those who do talk about God speak about God in a very monolithic way.
Yes.
If you study Rav Kook, for example,
Hmm.
very a couple of things that you just said are reminiscent a bit of his. He used to say that if the typical atheist is rejecting whatever, he goes, then maybe I'm an atheist too because I don't
Right.
really subscribe to that concept. I'm studying
Totally.
now an amazing work, which I was not raised with. I grew up in much more of the Maimonidean, rational, kind of cerebral kind of Judaism.
Right.
But since I've gotten a little older, I've taken a dip my toes into the world of Kabbalah and Chassidut, and I'm studying now. I've been studying with. I have my oldest son is a little more of a hippy dippy, and he's gotten me into the writings of Rav Shneur Zalman Liadi, who's the Baal HaTanya. He was the first Chabad
Yes.
and Lubavitch rabbi. If you study his work, and I'm teaching a course on this now, you're welcome to come 9:15 every Wednesday night. Little
Yeah.
plug. And his conception of God is really a force that really exists within each and every one of us.
Yes.
And that as opposed to viewing God as this sort of completely external thing out there and we are here and he's commanding us and we are being commanded, but there's an aspect of God within us. It's a total game changer. I'm also writing a book. It's a basic Judaism book, and I have 4 parts on God. And I use that term that you just, the old bearded man in the sky with the control panel sitting there, just sort of manipulating everything. And if that's a Western notion of God, it's very off-putting, and it may not be true as far as Torah is concerned. And people operate that, and that's why people shut down when you say God. So one of my other teachers, I don't know if you've ever read any of his books. They're amazing. David Aaron.
It's so fun. I actually, I did a conversation with him at one point, I believe.
Oh.
Very, very thoughtful guy. I was really moved by a lot of what he said.
Yeah. It's actually his birthday today, so we'll wish him a happy birthday. But Rabbi David Aaron, who's MG, has been bringing groups to his organization. It was called Israelite. Now he has his own school for day school graduates, a gap year program. Yeah. He's brilliant, and it's a totally different way of looking, not just at God, but at Judaism, because it all starts with so that's something. Oh, that's huge. That's a game changer for a lot of people.
Understanding that whatever the divine is, we don't know. It's beyond us. All of these theologies and theories, these are just concepts that allow us to connect with the divine, right? So if that man in the sky concept works for you, if it makes you feel connected, great, go with it. If the mystical idea that God is everything, you're God, I'm God, we're part of one thing, if that works, great, go with it. Right? It doesn't matter what conception.
Well, I would fine tune that last part because you mentioned idol worship before you. So in other words, the idea that we're all God, right? No, because it gets complicated. The concept of pantheism and panentheism,
right?
Because whatever, I struggle with some of that, and they're big issues.
But the idea that that there is this ultimate source of life, of which we're all part, right? That's not saying 100%. That any one person is God, right? Any unique person is God. But I think that is, each of these things gives you a little something. Each of them gives you a little pinpoint in the picture, right? And no one can see the whole picture. You're just trying to get glimpses.
Yeah, we have different rabbis on our staff, and we have our own little arguments, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And so this is like this is a really important conversation, because let me just ask you one last while we're talking about Jewish theology, chosenness. You speak about chosenness in the book, and you make it clear chosenness doesn't mean choice. Talk about that a little.
Yeah, I think so often Jews are uncomfortable with this idea of chosenness because they think it means that we are superior, right? They think it's saying that Jews are the superior people. And that's really not what it actually means. Like, I think that idea is kind of a misperception. I think the idea really is that we have a particular relationship with the divine, as do Buddhists, as do Christians, as do Hindus, right? Every religious and faith and cultural tradition, they have their own relationship with the divine. And they are all in some way saying, oh, we're kind of chosen for this relationship. This is our relationship. So I think that understanding it as a declaration of superiority is not correct. It's more a definition of specificity, of a certain uniqueness. And I think that, by each of these traditions bringing their own uniqueness to the world, I think it was Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi. I'm not sure, but someone said that there's a moral ecosystem and a religious ecosystem in the world. And every tradition is bringing something different and important to that. And if you lose any one of them, you actually lose some great moral wisdom. And I think that's, to me, what chosenness is about. I also think we're really more the choosing people. You either choose to engage in Judaism or you don't. No one has to be Jewish in modern emancipated society, right? I'm a citizen of the US. That is post-emancipation. That's kind of the deal. I can choose whether or not to practice Judaism, to engage in Judaism. And so I think that's actually the question today, is not, are we chosen to be some superior people? I don't think that's true. It's, we believe we have a specific mission in the world. And do you want to be part of that?
Beautiful. I mean, it's funny because I guess a lot of this is words. As a speechwriter, you'll appreciate linguistics. Chosen, it seems to imply some sort of natural superiority. Like, there's this special Jewish gene,
Right.
But if you look at the verse in the Torah, actually, that speaks about Am HaNivchar, which means the chosen people, The verse says that we're supposed to be a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of kohanim. Now, if you look at what a Kohen's job was within the community, so Cohen's job was this priestly caste that was supposed to be the ministers in the temple and the educators.
Yeah.
Now, are they better? Is a Kohen better than an Israelite? No. Just because they get the first aliyah before the Israelite, and I come to a synagogue, and if I'm a Skalin resident in some shul, there's like, are you a Kohen? I'm like, no, I'm just an Israelite. But that doesn't mean that we think a Kohen is better.
Of course.
We just means that they have a different job. And I always say, I have a lot of teachers who come to MJ. I'm like, is the teacher better than the student? No, you trained, you have something to share. And that, I think, is the challenge, because if we are supposed to be the teachers, the Kohanim of the world, then hopefully we have something unique that, to share, because it does, the concept of chosenness does presuppose there's something to share. Otherwise, then you're just what?
Yeah. And I think another basic fact to sort of undercut the idea that this is about superiority would be the Torah. I mean, take a look at, if you actually read the document, like you said, 36 times is love the stranger, right? The stranger is the non-Israelite. There is a real sense that the stranger is as worthy as the Israelite. So there's no superiority there. I would also point out that some of the most righteous characters in the Torah are non-Jews. Moses' life is made possible by a series of people who are not Jewish, right? From Pharaoh's daughter to Yitro to, there are a lot to the midwives who many commentators believe were Egyptians. There's a lot of people who make the Jewish people's existence possible. So I think of the idea that there's a sense of Jewish superiority, I think that's quite incorrect and quite disproven by the text of the Torah.
Yeah, that's actually, there's a little of a tension within the writings of the rabbis, because if you look at the more medieval Jewish rationalists like the Rambam, or later Sforno, the great Italian commentator, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, in the 19th century, they all speak about chosenness as a certain mission, purpose, but not implying any kind of natural sense of superiority. When you start getting into, I believe in being intellectually honest, when you start getting into Kabbalah, things change a little. Things change a little. It's actually very interesting. Now, it's a subtle difference. There's a subtle difference. Right. The Baal HaTanya speaks about a little of a difference between a Jewish and a non-Jewish soul, which can make a lot of people very, very uncomfortable. I questioned my rabbi, who was a great, great Torah sage, Rabbi Joseph Grumblatt, and I asked him what he thinks. And he brought up, he says, well, how do you deal with conversion then? Let's say there is a difference between a Jewish and non-Jewish soul, and then someone who isn't Jewish converts to Judaism. What happens? So as they are coming out of the mikvah, all of a sudden their soul, so then the Maharal, one of the great, more mystically minded rabbis, suggests the concept. My rabbi called it the verblunged neshama theory, which sounds, verblunged is like the confused soul. Like he got in the wrong line. He was supposed to be Jewish, but he wasn't. It sounds a little Jackie Mason. I don't know. It's very, very difficult. So it makes a lot more sense that we have different roles and we have different jobs. And I'm sorry, how do you say that 99.9% of the world of non-Jews are just sort of incidental?
Right. I mean, it just doesn't. And look, you can find all kinds of arguments in Jewish tradition, right? There, even beyond Kabbalah, that you definitely see arguments for Jewish superiority in parts of Judaism. But I think, and you're much more of a scholar than I am, but I think on balance, it's maybe a little bit more toward the chosen for a special mission idea than
I have a chapter in the book on this, and that's the thesis basically of that chapter, because I think that is the consensus of opinion. But I would love to, I just love what you said, and I think it's a good way to maybe bring our conversation to a close, a little about choosing. Because, whether you're chosen or not chosen, interesting academic issue, but the real question is, are you going to choose to be Jewish? You made a choice, and I love when successful people choose to be more Jewish, because it sort of fights against that Marx opiate of the masses. Religion's a crutch. It's for the people who couldn't really make it. And I know that was more of like a an idea that became popular in the world of communism and in other societies. But the Western version of that is that, why do I need religion? I'm doing great. I
Right.
got, my life is this, and MG's 22 years old now. It's not right to strut around the more successful and attractive people that have taken a turn to Judaism. And, like, I have a woman, she's amazing. She works for the post office. That's what she does. She's a post office worker. She comes to MG all the time. Like, she's, like you said before, her soul is on the same level as someone who went, Harvard,
Right.
and there's no difference. But I feel that sometimes I have to sort of prance around people like yourself. I'm saying it in a positive way, because we need to dispel this notion that religion is for people who couldn't otherwise make it, or, can't figure out, a more sophisticated philosophical approach to human existence. So they're going to tap into their old, Bubby and Zadie's religion that really doesn't make any sense. And so I just think your book and your whole message is incredibly inspirational, because, for someone, that's why I don't know if you've ever read Herman Wouk's book, This Is My God.
I started it. Yeah, I did.
I think you would really like it. The other people don't know this, but he wrote it like in his 20s.
Wow.
And he was already an important playwright, an
Yeah.
author, and he had it all. He didn't need to be Jewish.
Yes.
But he became more observant because he saw the value in it, and he saw how, together with his success in the material world, he could have just a better life, and it would add a certain level of profundity. He has a great line. He says that, without Judaism, it left out the most important figure in my life, he said, who was my grandfather. And that was a little more of a sentimental thing, and that got him to look at it.
Yeah.
But once he started looking at Judaism, and the book, by the way, it's another great book called "This Is My God," Herman Wouk. By the way, he lived close to where you live.
Oh,
He lived in Washington. He davened at Kesher,
I didn't know
which
that.
is like the modern Orthodox synagogue in
Yeah.
Washington. He was 102 when he died. He just died like 2 years
Oh my
ago.
gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, he was an unbelievable guy. But I want to thank you, because not just for coming on here, but for being vocal about your passion and your excitement and what Judaism has brought to you, because you have people are listening to you, and for good reason.
Thank you.
And you're doing what I think is a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, really sanctifying Hashem's name in the world by and being honest about it. You're not, sugarcoating. You're telling people what you think. We maybe don't agree on every single little point, but I think your whole tone and your whole message is just very, very inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such a joy to be in conversation with you. I would love to keep talking, because this was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. And did you come out with another book? You're coming out with another book?
No, nope. I would
thought.
like to.
Okay.
I would like
Scott,
to eventually write a book.
Scott said something to me
Oh, no, I
before.
am. I would like to write another book focused on God and spirituality, but
You
I
should.
haven't made a lot of progress on it during the pandemic. I hope to make
Right.
more. Yeah,
Right.
because I would like to.
You should, and you should just continue to be successful and to
Oh, thank
just do the
you.
amazing work you're doing. And thank you so much for your time. It was
Oh,
awesome.
thank you for having me. This was
Yeah.
great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.